as I think I heard Wally talking about coaching in the KHL, that's what I'm presently. I've retired, but I'm doing some. I'm the coaching advisor to Lokomotiv Yaroslavl in the KHL. I work with that coaching staff, and I enjoy it very much.
Dave, I want to introduce you to Hal Terse. Hal is, as you can see, is our age and had similar amounts of experience,
Yep.
and lives in Minnesota.
Terrific.
And knows Herb Brooks, knew Herb Brooks really well.
Yeah.
Before you came on, Dave, I sort of talked to him about knowing Herbie, having Herb watch a practice that you were running at Father Bauer, and how excited he was seeing a national team centralized and getting coaching like it was. He thought it was a seventh heaven, and of course, as everybody knows, the hockey world knows, when you can centralize great young athletes for a long time, you can do some miraculous things. So, Hal, would you introduce yourself and give us a bit of your background for Dave? And then I've got lots of questions for Dave about his new gig and other things that are going on in the hockey world that I'm sure he's aware of. Go ahead, Hal.
Thanks, Wally. Hello, Dave. I don't
Hi.
think we've ever met in person, but I'm certainly well aware of all the things you've done for hockey and appreciative of it. Yeah, I knew Herbie pretty well, and we worked on a number of projects together on development. And as a coach, I'm like 54 years into coaching since I quit playing in college, and currently U12, but I've done NCAA and Tier 1 juniors here in the U.S., Tier 2 juniors, a little bit with the Superior Junior International League, which my son played in. But still fairly passionate about coaching. I'm just finishing a video on how to run practice, and based on the observation that the average on-task activity in your youth and high school practices is about 9 minutes per player, and I've got my team up to 35 or 40 minutes per player just by doing some very simple things. And so I'll be sharing that video hopefully by the end of the week, but probably next week when it's fully edited. So, when games changed, we have to change how we coach because, it's the game so much different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. So anyways, nice to be introduced to you. I appreciate your spending time with us.
Well, thanks, Hal. And I got to tell you, Herb Brooks, back in 79, 80, I was lucky to be able to watch a little bit of their training and then, of course, to watch the Olympics. And he really was one of the first coaches, I think, to really incorporate some of the European game into our game. And at his terms, he tried to create that hybrid game. And I just think he did a lot because he was the first guy to start that ball kind of rolling at a very high profile level, the Olympics. So he deserves an awful lot of credit. And I had many, many great conversations with Herb along the way. And he was certainly made a big mark in our game in terms of helping us progress. Nice, great guy.
I was, and I was starting a high school program, and he was going to help me with, sort of get it up and running in 2000 and let's see, was it fall of 2004, and that's when he had the car accident and died in the middle of that summer. So, and his son's a friend of mine, and
oh, great.
I know that whole thing over there. But Herbie and I had a lot of great conversations over the years because I was at the national summer camp in '81 after they won the gold medal, and Lou Vero was the new Olympic coach, and
right
back when we were using amateurs in the Olympics, not professionals. And
that's
so
right.
It was pretty fun to be, hanging around those athletes and having a chance to coach some of those kids.
Well, I'm just going to interject again here. You know, it's interesting. I've always felt that in the late 70s, early 80s, Canadian and U.S. college coaches started to be brought into the NHL as assistant coaches with a lot of professional guys that had played the game a lot and wanted a little bit more expertise. That and they made a really a terrific contribution. I mean, when you go back to the early 80s, a lot of those guys you're talking about with the U.S. programs, a lot of people in Canada, the same thing. They came into coaching staffs in the NHL. They brought a little bit of science to the game. Uh, Fitness, especially, was the first emphasis. But it was really good to see that happen, and that really changed the game a great deal. You know, if you look at the game changing and evolving, there are key things that happened. And I think people forget that in the early 80s, college coaches coming into the NHL really started to change the NHL game and the professional game. And of course, it all filters down.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, Wally, what's up?
Well, I just wanted to mention that Hell's still coaching a high school team. Tom Malloy, who's coached all over the world and worked with famous people, you know, Russian coaches, and he's still coaching female hockey, and we're really actively involved, more at the minor hockey level. But Dave, you've been there, done that, growing up. I could tell 100,000 stories about you in your high school days, coaching high school sports and science and winning awards at that. But I just, I really could start so many different places. But here you are, similar to all of us, like Hal has written materials like you have and I have for our governing bodies and shared that out with coaches. And that coaching education piece is something that we still continue to strive to do. I'm really curious, Dave, where your life is at now, coaching and working in the KHL, what you might have gleaned over the time and seen the game change. But tell us a bit about your job and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis with the teams in the team in the KHL. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I feel really, I coached in the KHL in two places. I coached in Magnitogorsk way back in 2005 through 2006. And then I coached again in a year and a half there. They brought me in mid-season, I think 2012, came into Yaroslavl, and I coached there for the rest of that season and next season. So I've got some experience that I really enjoyed. I found Russian hockey really interesting. And I'll take you back a bit. When I went over in 2005, 2006, I was the first North American to coach in Russia. So, and I had been in the NHL and college hockey and the national team. So I just did things the way I did things, and I accepted what I knew what I could change. I knew what I couldn't change. So I tried to go in and adapt to their program as much as I expected them to try to adapt to some things that I was doing. And it's interesting because in 2005, 2006, the Russian hockey was still very, very Soviet hockey. The game didn't resemble at all very much our game. It was really the old Soviet style game. When I came back later in 2013 to Yaroslavl, I had seen a great change in the game. There was a lot more North American influence into the way they were playing. And then now, as a coaching advisor for Yaroslavl, I can really see now that, and watching NHL games, almost like watching the same game. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, we seem to be the country adapting to them and taking from them. But since then, it's been the other way around. The Russians have taken from our game and changed it a great deal, and they're playing very much the way the NHL teams play. So, the game is constantly changing. You're correct on that. And there's always reasons why it's changing. And I think the reason it's changed so much in the last 25 years in the KHL is so many Russian players have gone back to Russia, have started to coach or manage teams, and all of a sudden, they've brought in a lot of the things that they, as players, they learned in North America. And the video work they do now is outstanding. The coaching has really, really improved. There's some great coaches in Russia. The coaching staffs are much larger. They cover all the bases. And I would say they're as detailed as an NHL team would be in terms of how they coach their teams and approach their preparation. So, the game has really changed a great deal over there. In terms of the Russian game today, as I see it, the specialty teams, power play, PK are identical to what we do. And a lot of that, of course, has started way back. A lot of it started with the Czechs. I mean, the Czechs were probably the greatest teachers of the game. And that's where the Russians took a lot of things, was from Czech hockey. But their power play PK is almost the same. Their forechecking game, they've done the same thing we've done. There's a tendency now to drop a player back and have at least 3 players back. So teams play 1-1-3, 1-3-1. It's the same in Russia. You can take the red line out. So to adapt, more teams have gone with the safety of 3 back on that layer of defense. So that's very similar. So the game is very, very similar. The only place where I see real old Soviet hockey, I call it Soviet hockey because it was back in the communist days, is on build-ups or regroups. Like, they like to play the quick regroup game, but when they can't, when teams are falling back and playing 4 to 5 back and really compact and there isn't much space, they go back and it's a lot of interchange of position. They bring the puck up, back pass it to try to disrupt your gaps and those things. Well, if you look at the NHL power play breakout, that's the most common. It's the back pass where they take it up ice, back pass it, make your gap control much more difficult. They establish a lot of speed, and then the speed meets your defense, which is not moving very quickly at the blue line, and things can happen. They get an entry. So that idea that's where it started. It started with the Russian buildups. They were the first ones to use the back pass, disrupt gap control, and come at you with lots of speed. So that's the only part of the game that I think is still Soviet. Everything else, very North American. And it's interesting. When you watch it on TV, it just strikes you right away like, wow. These guys, the adaptation now for a player to go from the KHL to the NHL is not a big step other than cultural. It's not a big step. Tactically, it would be an easy move for a player to make that move. And then go for North American players to go to play in Russia, the KHL. It's not difficult other than the rinks. Most of the rinks are still larger. There are a few that they did make smaller when the IIHF mandated smaller ice surfaces for world championships. But most of the rinks there are still quite large.
Dave, I've got a question here. You're talking about the Soviets, and I do remember how they regrouped. And I never really thought of the NHL power play breakout as a regroup, but the thing I remember most, and I called it the jackhammer.
Yep.
They used to throw the puck back and immediately touch it to the open, sprinting, stretching forward. And I always thought, boy, that's a really good tactic that could be used today. But watching the NHL today, they're starting to plug up and back up and 3 back all the time. And we were at a game last night. They have it, the Crowchild Classic, Dave, where the 2 male and female college teams played each other at the Saddledome.
Okay.
And both the U of C men's and the Mount Royal teams, they took that power play breakout to another level. I've never seen anything like it. And they managed to gain entry, but I don't know that you can jackhammer anymore and take advantage of stretching to get in behind. I've always thought, and if you could talk on this, the game hasn't changed. We haven't been able to take advantage of the red line. And is there any way we can?
Can I interject here, Wally?
Go ahead, yeah.
Well, Calgary played St. Louis the other day, and St. Louis flies the zone as soon as it looks like the D's getting the puck. And they got 3 breakaways on Calgary, just totally went behind him and the D, wasn't alert. So that was the most, I've seen a team fly the zone and be successful with it. So that's something that's,
Dave, the
Yeah.
hybrid icing.
Yeah.
Last night I was amazed. They just fired the puck out and it was a race for the puck and it wasn't called. Is that existing in the KHL?
Yeah, a little bit. It's Tom's comments are interesting too. I think what happens is when you change rules, coaching gets in the way. Like taking out the red line has caused the game to be faster because players can build speed and maintain it longer to the far blue line, whereas before you could be an offside option and not at all available. So the game is faster because of the red line, and it at times it can give us a breakaway. That shouldn't happen 3 times in one game. Calgary's coaching staff better look at that because that's ridiculous. Because most NHL teams now, because of the red line being taken out, they like to play neutral zone defense with at least 3 back. So the seams are tighter. It's harder to find those breakaway plays. Really, what the NHL game is, and same in Russia. The best skill and the most improved skill in our game today, in my opinion, is steering. The ability to steer the attack on the forecheck. And if you watch a lot of Russian games, the game's taking place, and if you suddenly get a breakout versus a forecheck, if you freeze it, it's interesting because this rink is 100 feet wide, and there's 9 players on one side of the ice. If you drew a line longitudinally down the middle of the rink, there would be 9 players on half the ice. The other half the ice, you might as well pave paradise and put up a parking lot because they don't use it very much. I think the one thing that the NHL game is, and it's in major junior too, is we want to push the puck up ice. So we stretch, post up, long indirect or direct pass, bump it to the inside speed if it's there. If not, chip it behind and establish the forecheck. So we now have a game where we play a lot of our game from breakout to neutral zone against the forecheck. We play a lot of our game on half the ice. Just watch a game sometime. Just freeze it every time you see a breakout against a forecheck, aggressive forecheck. And you'll see there's 8 or 9 guys on one side of the ice. So I'm waiting for somebody to be a little bit more inventive or innovative, I guess is the word, and start to come up with some ways to get more attacking width. Because our game, we just force it up into pressure, get it behind the pressure, and then we forecheck like hell. That is, I'm not saying every play, but that is a lot of it. There's no question that when you change rules, we adapt very quickly. Coaches are terrific at adapting, and that's what's happened, Wall, in my opinion.
Now, in Russia, are they adapting as in their game, or are they just waiting for and watching the NHL and adapting to just because the NHL does it?
Oh, I get the impression you're right on, Wally. I get the impression that they're not going to change much. And of course, in that big wide rink, to see all that space over there, really, I'll go back a bit. I think if you're going to try to use that space to get attacking width, it's that free defenseman is the guy who's got to come up and fill that side and give you an opportunity to move the puck up the weak side of the ice. So that's what they're going to have to do. But playing up into pressure doesn't sound smart, but as long as you redirect, use the indirect passes, which are very hard to defend, you can chip it behind. And I think it's a safe way to get through the middle zone and then establish speed on the forecheck. And so our game has become faster because of that tactic. It's a lot of long indirects, and guys are anticipating breaking hard through the middle zone. They know the guy's going to chip it, and off they go and they forecheck. So it's and that's why goalies are so important, because when they can play the puck, they do help you sometimes break the forecheck. So it's really interesting, and I think they're just waiting for us to come up with to show some adaptation to that. I think the one thing I would say if I was coaching again, anywhere, I would really work hard with my free defenseman being very, very active, anticipating and making sure as much as he can. He can't always. Sometimes he won't be in position to do this, but as much as he can to support and provide options to the weak side, but as well, the defenseman who's going to be steered, if he has enough separation, be more deceptive. Don't just accept the steer, skate into the steer, and then indirect it off the boards. You know, a change of direction, that type of thing. And I think sometime too, I don't know when, but you know, soccer uses their goalie a lot now. Hockey has too, but I don't know. I think we should take that what do they call it? The quadrangle behind the net, where the goalie can't leave. You should take that out. Let the goalie play the puck. I mean, it's more exciting. We need some excitement. If they make a few mistakes, maybe we'll get some more goals. But you know, I think it's very interesting that we haven't come up yet with ways to really, and it's not so much tactical, Wally. It's individual tactics. You know, it's just I don't think sometimes we do enough to help the players understand why we should do things. Here's what we should do. Here's how we should do it. And I think a lot of players have no idea of why we should do it. And really, understanding precedes execution. So to me, that's one thing I've always felt you know, in coaching we have to do is make sure guys gain understanding. Because once they understand what you're asking them to do, the execution goes way, way up.
See, Dave, you made the point, and something that we've been harping on for years. Coaching has got to go from yelling and telling
Yeah,
to asking.
you're right.
Because when you ask players questions, and I really believe one of the pitfalls in NHL coaching, and not pitfalls, I think some of the highly educated coaches are getting it, is they ask questions or they're wondering what the players are thinking more than telling them what they think. I think at the NHL level, coaching communication, and particularly on the bench, I would sure love to know what's going on inside the brains of the brilliant players.
Yeah.
Before I even thought of suggesting something to them. So we've talked about the Socrates method of coaching and business. We've had a couple of hockey people now that are professors, and this is the methodology they're using with their students to get together to solve problems and come up with their own solutions, where historically we've created the structure, we've created the patterns, and basically made them robots. And I see a lot of players, a lot of brilliant players, and some brilliant teams that aren't cohesive, that may not be as successful as they could be, because the balance between the creativity and the freedom of those outstanding gifted players and the outcome that the team strives to achieve hasn't been done as much as you would like. So
yeah, I would agree with that, Wally. I think there's still a real tendency in our game for coaches to take on the role of instructor. And I think they should take on the role maybe more of facilitator, where you know, players know. I've always felt, sorry guys, I've always felt I've learned more sometimes just talking to players than I have anybody else. I mean, sometimes players have the answer. They won't give it to you because they don't want to get in the way, but they know how to, I mean, they show you sometimes that they really truly know what they should do. So I think in coaching, we have to stop just taking the role of the instructor and try to ask more questions, and because they'll provide you with some profoundly simple answers to some of the tactical things you want to solve. So, but again, that takes some kind of a change in philosophy, I guess, to do that.
Dave,
I saw something, Winnipeg's game, they were in overtime, and I've never seen this before. They did about 6 high scissors. They were just going side to side like this and doing it all the time. Of course, every time the D's They got to decide whether to stay man-to-man or switch.
Mhm.
I've never seen a team do that often. It was kind of how they did their 3-on-3 on the attack.
Yeah, I find the 3-on-3 play, Tom, I give them great points for, what do they used to say in figure skating? Style points.
Yeah.
When I watch it now, I mean, I find it all that interesting. I find them, yes, everybody's doing lots of, like the work width wise is great. There's lots of changing sides, trying to make the defenders make decisions. And everybody now is playing pretty much straight man to man. And it's too bad because for style points, it's nice to watch, I guess, but not much happens sometimes. They keep waiting for a breakdown. They'll leave the offensive zone, get a line change, back they go again. And I don't know. It's not
I wish
really.
there was that over and back rule, because that's awful when they do that. They go back
Yeah,
and they say,
yeah,
don't.
yeah.
It used to be, before they started doing that, it used to be really exciting. But
I wonder sometimes if we're ever going to get to the point in the evolution of the game, if we need a shot clock, both offensive zone and 3-on-3. I mean, it's unbelievable. Sometimes in the offensive zone, the cycles are long possessions that don't really lead to anything, you know? And really, if you think about it, defensive zone coverage now is collapsed to the net. So there's no space inside to make a play for the offense. And then your guys going out to the points are crucial, that they're in shot lanes and block shots.
yeah.
You watch Tampa Bay, the most successful teams, they gather at their net and they're really good at shot blocking.
Yeah. Well, again, I couldn't take any more of the girls' game last night. I left after the second period. It was 0-0. One team had 9 shots, the other had 12 shots, and absolutely nothing was happening because that's what both teams were doing.
Yeah.
And there was nothing at all that was appealing about watching it.
Isn't that something? Wow. That's not a good statement for our game, Tom, but it's very interesting.
That was exceptional. The men's game was really exciting.
Yeah.
They ended up in a shootout and
Yeah.
Well, Dave, just
Yes.
trying to, in keeping with, the audience that we have, there's a lot of minor hockey coaches out there, and I'm involved a little bit in HP evaluations, high performance.
Yep.
And development 1, which is the first stage of becoming a competitive coach. And one of the things that I believe I'm really, really trying to push for in the time we've got left is to get coaches to take a routine in coaching between periods where they talk amongst themselves before they go into the dressing room about what did we do well, what can we do better, but then ask the players those same questions.
Yeah.
And wait for the answer, because you're likely telling them things they already know and understand, and maybe you can reduce your talking by listening to them and discovering what you have to teach, or what they might not know, or probably learn something from them that we wouldn't learn if we didn't listen to them. So that old Socrates method to me, and I just wonder in the KHL, do they have iPads at the bench like the NHL, and are the players looking at it?
Yeah, they have iPads. There's probably 3 or 4 iPads. The coaches, that's for player use, and then the coaches, at least 2 or 3 of your assistant coaches have iPads. So, they're constantly using those. Wally, I think that's a brilliant idea. I think the idea of what you're saying makes so much sense because, yes, you should, as a coaching staff, discuss it so you're kind of on the same page. And then asking the players is brilliant because I agree with you. I think they can tell you what they have to do. I think they can tell you pretty close to what they have to do. And sometimes they may give you a good idea of what they should have done. So it's a learning process for coaches as much as players. And I really like that idea of the, like, asking questions. Quit being the, source of all the information. Ask some questions. Linda, my phone's gone on me. Hello.
I can hear you, Dave, but I can't see you.
Yeah, something's happened here on my. Go ahead, Wally. We'll do it audio wise.
Okay. Dave, I'm just curious here. Back in our day, we were playing against the Soviets, and I'm sure 90% of the people that are involved in coaching today, particularly the players, don't know what the hell that was and why they were so good. And I wonder if you could elaborate on, because you had to coach an amateur Canadian national team to compete against the Soviets, and nobody realized how good they were athletically, technically, and tactically. So it's a bit of a history lesson here, because I often talk about Soviet hockey and use the word Soviets. And now Russia is Russia, and many of the former communist states have become their own countries. So can you talk a bit about that, Aaron? How you got into it, and the beginning of realizing that how what they were doing and that what we could do better.
Well, it was a long process. I learned a heck of a lot when I started to coach the. I was lucky. When I was coaching at the University of Saskatchewan. I got an opportunity to coach Canada's national junior team, and so I saw some things there that tip of the iceberg. And then when I went to the national team and we played 22 or 23 games against Russian teams every year. Our schedule would be about 60 games, and I would say 22 to 26 or 7, I guess, would be against Russian teams. Izvestia Cup, Spengler Cup always had Russian teams, and then our tours in Canada and all those kind of things. So I learned a heck of a lot. I guess, it's funny when you coach at that level, people always said, why are you so defensive? And,
we got some kickback, so somebody's turning off their speaker.
Okay, so anyway, well, I'll go. I think we're okay now. I just very quickly, I learned one thing, and it's much easier to prevent a team from scoring than it is to score. Scoring is the hardest thing to do in the game. Defending is the easiest thing to do in the game if you have an attitude and you have some aptitude to try to do it. So, I remember going to the Izvestia Cup and playing against the Russians, and I think for the first 8 or 9 minutes, we saw the puck. We never had the puck. Like, they continually had the puck. And in those days, they would go back and build up and come back at you again. And you're trying to tell your guys to tighten your gaps, and they're saying, pardon me, you can't do it. They're coming too fast. There's too many people moving. So I learned one thing. If we were going to be competitive, we better be pretty good defensively. Yes, we worked on offense, but we had to work a lot on defense because we were going to be playing probably, I don't know, 65-45 without the puck percentage-wise. But we really knew one thing. We had to increase our skill offensively with the puck. Because one thing I did learn about playing against the Russians, if you can hold the puck and literally possessions, I wouldn't say slow it down, but yes, you do slow it down. You had a better chance because in the offensive zone, we were never in a rush to score unless it was a great opportunity. We'd hold the puck cycle because we wanted them to have to stop. If they stopped, we had a much better opportunity to, if they break out, to defend from a stop position versus going into the zone, taking a wide angle rush shot or whatever. They're getting a rebound and bang, they're gone. Somebody's got a breakaway. So you learn all those little adaptations, Wally. And I enjoyed that, but I do think that the Russians and the Soviets in those eras, they were very fit, tactically very good. They really understood what they were doing. That's the one thing that really impressed me about the Russians. They weren't bots. They understood clearly what they were being asked to do. They knew what they were achieving when they stretched you out. They knew when they knew their tactics well. They understood them well. And that's the one thing I always got most out of the Russians was, God, these guys really understand what they're doing because they played so well. They moved the puck. I mean, we talked about one-touch passing. That's what they did. They one-touch pass. They kept on the move. That's why they were so fast, and they were really hard to defend. But I felt very fortunate at that time. And, you know, Herb Brooks would probably tell you the same thing when he coached in, you know, 79, 80, that Olympic year against the Russians. You learn more than you probably thought you would, but it's a great experience. And I always felt that Russian hockey at that time, we took a lot from them. And as I said earlier, that's changed now. The equation's gone back the other way, Wally.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Is Ursinov still around?
Yeah, Yurzhinov is still around. He still does some consulting work with Moscow Dynamo in the KHL. Still very, he hasn't changed at all. He's still very intense, loves the game. He was a guy, everybody talks about Tikhonov. It was Yurzhinov who was, I think, more home. So you know what he's like. He could be really stern with the players, but he had a little Tarasov in him.
Somebody turn their speaker off.
Yeah, he was a great friend of Yohanni because he coached
Yeah.
TPS too in Turku there.
Yeah,
And then when I went to the Red Bulls, he was coming 1 week a month there.
yeah. Well, Tom, if you look at the game changing in Finland,
Yeah.
it was the Russian coaches that went to coach in the Finnish Elite League. I mean, Yurzhinov, I remember talking to Saku Koivu, who played for him at TPS, and Saku said, like, we never trained with a Finnish coach 2 or 3 times a day, like, you know, twice on the ice, in the weight room. And the one thing Yurzhinov did, and I think the Russian players would all say it, they all came to the realization they could do a lot more than they thought they could do. That's a player. A player, they were pushed hard and they started to realize they could do it. And it changed the game in Finland a great deal. And Yurzhinov's a great coach. He's an unbelievable guy, too. That's what I found. I found the Russian coaches terrifically interested in exchanging ideas. They're open, you know.
Yeah.
They talk hockey.
Yeah, he's one of the nicer guys I've met along the way, I think.
Absolutely.
Dave, in terms of Russian coaches, I have to share this story. Playing with the national team, the Russians were in town, and the big bear Tarasov was running practice. I substitute taught when I played with the team, but when the Russians were in town, I didn't teach. I went and watched them practice.
Right.
And they were preparing for us, and he did a deliberate breakout drill. And I think it's sort of like the counter pinch, but it's more like a high winger tip to the center coming across. They were preparing for our North American aggressive pinch.
Yep.
And they spent time redirecting the puck from the winger on the boards high in front of the defenseman to the sprinting support player, the center iceman. So they created a 2-on-1 up high on a breakout.
Yep.
This is in the late
60s.
In the late 60s, 70s. So, my God, they're doing that stuff back then. And that was, I think, a game day practice that they were having. To play us that night. So,
you know,
watching it, I realized, oh my God, look at what we're up against.
You know, it's interesting. When I was in Yaroslavl, the year after I was there, I guess it was, they brought over a North American skills coach, a guy who coordinated the coaching staffs working with the kids. And when that happened, they were talking about it and they asked me for names and they were doing, and I thought, my goodness, I never thought ever when I was coaching our national team that we would be instructing the Russians on skill development. But, you know, we've done a lot, like in Canada and the US, there's a lot of great coaching going on. And I guess it says a lot about and I still think, Wally and Tom, I know you guys know this so much. It's coaching. We have to get, we have to keep working at coaches and not just on the tactical, technical stuff. We have to get coaches to work with the kids because the game is for the kids, not for the coaches. And I think we have to have a goal above just winning. Winning is important, and it's nice to win a championship, no question. But, you know, if you can develop people, I think we all talk about that in sport. And I don't think still we do a good enough job of working with people and developing better people, better individuals. I saw the thing this morning in the news here about the national junior team and 5 players are going to be charged or whatever. And I thought to myself, does this game do what it's supposed to do? I find it discouraging at times. I go out and watch a game and I watch the technical skill and I think, wow, really good. I just hope these are good young people too that we're teaching them good things, what's right, and that's really important. So,
Dave, I'm glad you brought that up because we talked about it yesterday as well when you phoned us and Ken Babby and I were in Dick's Steakhouse. And in fact, Mark Petros just came over and he read the blog that was released announcing that.
Yeah.
I think back to the day, Dave, that we were requested by the CAHA to write a Goals 3 video to try to prepare for changing the environment of sport because at the time it was too aggressive. There was hitting from behind and really insurance rates were going up because of spinal injuries.
Correct.
But the first chapter of the module was a mission statement exercise and knowing why you're coaching and knowing why you're parenting and playing. And so the mission statement exercise, I've taken it up when I've delivered that particular module. I call it an ethical coaching module.
Right.
At every clinic I've certified at every level, but it slipped through the cracks because you were there when the national team existed. Then when you left, the influence of yourself and those people like ourselves on the ethical nature and of the game and the sharing of knowledge sort of went by the wayside. Mm-hmm. And I really do feel I don't blame those young men. I blame us, the adults that were looking after the sport, the leaders of the sport, to make sure that the message is delivered and coaches are influenced to coach the right way with a values base versus an outcome base.
Yes.
If you do things the right way, you're going to achieve better outcomes.
You are, for sure.
So I'm glad you brought that up, and I've earmarked that to edit it for people down the road. I had one question, Dave, and I've been talking to Thomas Pacina, who you know very well.
Right.
Thomas is working with the Maple Leafs now, living in Prague, and he's in charge of their draft choices that are playing in Europe and monitoring them, following them, spending time with them on the ice. Mm-hmm. And he goes back to Toronto at least once a month for a week. And he's on the inner sanctum of the Maple Leafs. And he and I talked the other day. Hayley Wickenheiser is working with them in a pretty influential capacity. She really is a bright young lady who is still practicing medicine in emergency, which allows her the flexibility to be very hands-on inside the walls of the Maple Leaf Association. So Thomas now working with them, and he's observing, here's a team with extreme talent that hasn't been able to achieve the success given that talent that it should. And that seems to be the challenge in the NHL is you get the high salaried players. They're going to play all situations more often than others. They're overplayed to the extent that the other players don't feel a part of the team. And how would you deal with that today? Because I don't think you had that discrepancy of salary and talent that they seem to have existing today, and you have to build a team to win a championship.
Oh, that probably is the biggest challenge a coach has in the NHL now. I don't think it's technical. I think you've got a large coaching staff. You've got all kinds of, information available to you. You've got people giving you a lot of good. One of the biggest problems now for an NHL coach, there's just too many people giving you too much information. And at times that's where the overload takes place right there. But to answer your question, that's a skill. That's what the best coaches, that's what the most successful coaches in the NHL do. It's not their tacticians. Their interpersonal skill with their players is good. Like they make players that aren't in the central core in terms of talent and money, they make those guys really feel very important. Like if I'm coaching the Toronto Maple Leafs, I can spend a lot of time if I want top 8 or 9 guys, but if I spend a lot more time with the guys on the peripheral, they're going to be the difference makers. And I don't say difference makers in terms of the score sheet, but in terms of work ethic, honesty, playing together, playing selfless, playing for each other. Those are the guys that make the difference, because you watch the NHL playoffs, it's attrition, it's a battle. You got to remember, you only play the league games to get into the playoffs. When the playoffs start, you might have to play the game, one team 7 times in 12 or 13 nights. So it's your chemistry. It's, the old expression that Wayne Halliwell used to do, it's, see it, appreciate it, acknowledge it. If that exists within your team, that helps the players that aren't getting paid big money to get some perks, to get some attention. And that's what coaching's about. It's the interpersonal skills of an NHL coach now and a staff, not just a coach, but a staff. That's really critical. Like, I don't think any team is that superior to anybody else tactically in terms of what they do. But I've worked with John Cooper at the 2017 World Championships. He uses his staff really well. He's a bright, intelligent guy. He makes sense. He can be a little bit sarcastic at times, but he's a really good coach. And he spends a lot of time on the interpersonal part of his job. Not tactically, he knows what he's doing, and they do it well, but his team is very collective, connected, and that's why they're so successful.
Well, Dave, in the Soviet Union, or pardon me, Russia today, is there the same problem of egos and salary discrepancies that coaches have to deal with over there?
No, there's not. I don't think there's any, with some of the NHL guys coming back, some of those guys that have come back and are playing, they think they have a little extra status. I guess maybe. I never experienced that when I was in Russia. There was guys I knew were getting paid a lot more than other guys, but it's just the Russian way. They play together. No one gets, the top players get the same feedback an average player gets. No one gets any perks in terms of being allowed to make mistakes, et cetera, So that's, I never felt that. I over here, there's an entitlement, Wally. And, NHL, you can't keep your core now happy. You're gone. I mean, if your top 10 guys don't feel like treated the way that you'll be out of a job. So it's difficult. It's really, it's the old expression, Wally. You got to get good people. I mean, if I'm going to pay somebody a huge amount of money, he better be the right type of guy. And not just the skill, but I better make sure that I know this guy is going to play for the team and going to be a guy who, can see a bigger picture than just his own personal picture. It's really hard. That's handling people, working with people, helping people be better. That's the key to coaching. But we have a large enough coaching staff who should be able to do that.
Well, the more people you've got, the more communication you need, and quite often there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Wally, that's true. Now we have so many consultants. We have so much data coming down to us. Like I remember my last couple of years with the Coyotes, Tipper would be between periods. He'd dash into the office, get on his computer, get the analytics he needed, and that was it. We never talked. And I remember seeing them, Tipper, I know there's some analytics here, and they're important stuff, but let's just can't we just still, as a coaching staff, talk for a second or two before we go in and talk to the guys? But, the most important assistant coach was the computer, not our interchange the last couple of years. And I think Tip started to realize that and started to, you're working with people, you need information, but you still need a lot of communication. You need a lot of people that, are helping you, but not overloading you. I can't believe now how many coaches get overloaded with so much information. It's really scary. It's a hard job. I think coaching now is way harder than it was in my era.
Well, Dave, even this Bantam, I'm coaching this Bantam girls team, eh?
Yeah.
I get that Instat thing with all the
Mm-hmm.
video of everything.
Yeah.
And and these are 13, 14-year-old girls.
Yeah.
So it's pretty incredible.
It is. And I don't know. I'd be really interested, Wally, if you could do this sometime. I'd be interested as to what are our growth rates, or are there growth rates in young players playing hockey? Or are they going other places? Is the dropout rate at a lower age now? Because now at about age 11 or 12, guys realize I'm not going to be a hockey player. There still is time to make a switch. And so I'd be really interested. Like, this game used to be the most dominating game in our country in terms of numbers of participation. I'm not sure we're still there. I don't know that. I should know that, but I don't.
Well, my guess is that it's become a sport that's unaffordable for the middle class.
Yeah.
Definitely an upper middle class sport now. Speaking from experience, my own granddaughter chose soccer and is on a soccer scholarship. And, the cost of equipment,
Oh, boy.
all those things factor into it. The same problems exist coaching, team building, playing together to be your best, and they exist in all sports. So when we talk about egos and helicopter parents and lawnmower parents and double shifting and shortening the bench to win games at youth hockey, which is happening,
Yeah.
those are the kind of things that concern me most, is the ethical coaching to develop the best people we can, because they play a sport that
Right.
teaches you how to be a team player. So it is a difficult challenge here that it's the crux of the problem that has just come to fruition and dealt with in a concrete way with Hockey Canada. So
Yeah, the one thing that I remember this as clear as a bell, I think in 1990 or 91, George Kingston, myself, some other coaches were invited to Toronto, and Ken Dryden was kind of the host or the moderator, and we were talking about hockey development, and they wanted us to tell them what the Europeans did with these hockey academies that supplemented what the kids got in their regular stream programs. And so we talked a lot about that. And, we even went as far as to drop curriculum as a sample to, this is what you could do, but our whole thought was that this would supplement our present programs in the community. And what it's done, it's mankind. And I don't blame anybody, but we always try to find a way to make money from something. And so now the academies are, hey, I'm sure they do a great job. And I actually helped my son at the Prairie Hockey Academy in Saskatchewan a little bit, but they pay enormous amounts of money. And when I go out there, I can see 2 or 3 kids in every group that might make it. Maybe. The rest aren't going to be hockey players. They're probably going to get a little bit better. But, I've always been confused, but I guess I shouldn't be, is that, we used to have hockey schools. Now we don't. We have hockey academies. And they've weakened, I think, community programs. And I don't know what we're doing sometimes. Like, we allow the entrepreneurs to come in and upset the balance in our game. And I got to tell you, Wally, I sometimes have a hard time with it. And again, my son is involved in as an instructor and coaching curriculum director for a program. But I just find this interesting that we always have to find a way to ka-ching, make some money out of something that hockey schools used to be a bargain. A kid could come to a hockey school for $50 for a week and got a heck of a lot of instruction and some good ideas and everything else. Now it's hugely expensive. So I'll get off the apple box. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Dave, because in your era, my era, and you were the foundation of creating coach education programs. And going back to those, we learned how to break down a skill and teach a skill.
Yeah.
And I think of the whole part whole method.
Yeah.
We knew how to view skills from the front, from the back, from the side.
Yeah.
And we could detect errors and we could break it down to teach. And then we would take that into being able to design a drill and tweak a drill and build a drill into a sequence that would accomplish a purpose. And what's happened with the coach education program, they've actually eliminated the fundamental teaching of biomechanical principles, skill analysis, to be able to break down and teach skills. And this was sort of, we wanted every coach to be able to do that. So we've reached a point now where coaches are not educated in skill breakdown, creation of drills.
Yeah.
They're drill copiers, drill stealers, and they just do drills that the players, in most cases, can't do well enough because they don't have the skills needed to do the drill in. And I think Tom is on the right track in terms of filling the void.
Yeah.
Let the game teach.
Yeah.
Just let them play small area games, get lots of touches. If you can't teach, don't interfere and negate the development by interfering with their enjoyment of playing. And they will figure things out just by playing the game. Their decision making and their skills will improve.
Yes, they will.
Small area games. So I'm really caught in there's that line between the skills experts and at what point do we let the development go on. So I call it progressive deliberate practice, which is like hockey school.
Yep.
And then random game-like practice, which is small area games, and that balance.
Yep.
In terms of with young players of enjoyment and accomplishing more in terms of their development.
Yep. Well, you're on the right. I mean, that's, I know it's for all of us in coaching. I love hockey. I love the game. I love it when I can see kids playing street hockey or shinny, where we're up in Canada when it's in the cold weather and they can get on the outdoor rinks and stuff. I love that stuff. I mean, to me, I don't know why I used to freeze my toes and get frostbite on my nose, and that's how I learned to love the game. And then when it started to snow, you had to shovel it off. So I'm going back to a time when there was a romance with the game, and there's no longer much romance with our game. Now it's all it's parents driving it, getting specialists. There's a goal in mind. My kid's going to play at the top level and be a millionaire and everything else. I know that, and I'm probably exaggerating, and I'm getting a little frustrated here. But the game has changed so much, Wally, that we got to be very careful because the main reason we're having kids play the game is to develop and become a better person, more fit, learning to work and cooperate with others, learning to share. All those things are very valuable. But now the main concern is, how do I get him big, faster? How do I make his skill level better? And so the game's gone in a whole different direction. And it's for all of us old guys, it's not easy because we've gone through a huge change. I mean, my development as a player was playing shinny. I mean, that's where I learned the most about stick handling. A guy slashed you, you kind of there's no referee, so you had to deal with it. Just keep playing. And you learn to play with a stick that had half a blade on it. So that's how you developed. It was just informal, having so much fun, and you're getting so much better. You never realized it, but you're getting so much better. So you're saying it's all these small ice hockey. I agree with you. Like sometimes we just um, overdo it. And I think that's what we're doing with hockey right now. We're overdoing it, overloading kids. Um, we're creating sometimes dreams that are not there. I don't know why we have to invest so much money in some things that have they don't go anywhere unless they do develop a better person. And that's the key. If they're developing a better person, good idea.
Dave, I've talked to Swedish coaches and Finnish coaches.
Yeah.
They have that same problem in those countries.
Yeah.
What about in Russia?
Well, in Russia, it's interesting in Russia because when you go to a practice for kids in some cities, well, first of all, the club team runs the youth hockey. So in every city, like in Yaroslavl, the Lokomotiv has its development program. It's not community. It's the team that runs the development program. And every level is coached by ex-Lokomotiv players and hockey experts. And very often, the parents aren't allowed into practice. They're allowed in the rink to pick the kids up, drop them off, but they can't stay during practice. That's not the same in every place, but Lokomotiv, that's what they do. And really, there's no magic to what they do. It's a high repetition. It's for sure they pay attention to a lot of little details that maybe we don't in terms of the skill development. But parents are still ambitious. There's a lot of parents that I don't think they have individual skill coaches because there's no ice available for an individual skill coach. You have to work for the club. But most of the clubs now have skill coaches that I think the kids can access. But there's really everything's run through the team. Your program is laid out. And I think it's like all of us. We have to be careful as to how much we overload the kids with information, and they need other diversions in their life besides just bloody hockey. But Russia, they do a really good job of developing players, obviously. But they still have their problems too. There's no question about that.
Dave, I'm really curious. When you coached over there, you coached some young men who became NHL stars.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk about seeing some of those players and how they progressed and went on, and the role of the KHL in terms of motivating young Russians to play in the NHL.
Yeah, I've coached a number of guys that are still, some of them are still from Yaroslavl in the NHL. Magnitogorsk, I had like Nikolai Kulemin and guys like that. But the one guy who gets all the attention in Magnitogorsk I was very fortunate to be able to work with Evgeny Malkin. And, these guys are all just like our kids. You could tell they love to play the game. So there was a real love. And that seems to be, if you don't love it, you won't stay with it because the game has a lot of highs and lows for a young developing player, especially if you got to move up to the next level. It's a mental thing. And so your love of the game often keeps you at it and keeps you, staying with things. So Malkin and those guys, they all had that kind of thing. They were very special athletes and they're like our kids. They always played above their age level. Good players there get accelerated to play at a level that where their skills are certainly capable of playing at that level. And they do a good job with young players. I really felt that one of the strongest things I saw with, say, the development of Malkin, the older players were good for him. They knew he was going to be a star. They knew he was a difference maker at age 18. But he had a lot of respect for the older players. And they weren't afraid to give him a scolding sometimes and keep him in line if they had to. And then when he was down, they were guys that they would pick him up. So I saw really good mentorship from a lot of players on our team when I coached in Magnitogorsk, especially because that was, in those days, that was Soviet hockey, not today's present Russian hockey. But it's interesting because I got to tell you, I should tell you a little story about coaching in 2005, 2006 in Russia. I was the first and this is how far it's come. I was the first North American coach to go there. So about the third or fourth day, we're in training camp, and these guys are not in great shape. And I'm talking to my assistant coach, and he said to me, well, we have 19 preseason games. We'll get there. We have a month and a half. So I thought, oh gosh, that's right. I got to remember that. The second thing is, I'm talking to our doctor, and I asked him where he did his, his education. Was he, a specialized school for, for that type of thing? And he said, yeah, I'm a specialist. And I said, oh boy, that's great. Elbows, knees, hips. He said, oh, no. I'm a gynecologist. So I learned back in 2005, 2006, that the Soviet hockey was still way back. Now, if you go to Russia and meet with a team and see all the aspects of their development, it's mind-boggling. And so they're going to continue to develop really good players. But I do think they keep a top player more in line than maybe we do. Our top players feel entitlement. I don't think in Russia top players feel that way at all.
Dave, I could have used a gynecologist coaching 3 years ago at SAIT. I recruited this 6-foot goalie, and and it had to be video then. That was recruiting in the COVID year, right?
Yeah.
So she come to camp, and I'm thinking, geez, she's not moving very well.
Yeah.
Compared to what I thought and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
September 29th, she had a baby. So
awesome.
not even her mother knew she was pregnant.
Oh my God, that's total. That's a good one, Tom. That may be the best I've ever heard.
Oh, I'm watching her thinking she looks so good in the video there, up and down and moving all over the place.
I'll tell my wife that one, Tom. Thanks. Oh God.
Dave, the idea of coaching in the NHL, successful coaches, the most successful coaches.
Yeah.
There was an era where they were bringing in, I think Winnipeg Jets brought in a Finnish coach, and
yeah,
they've experimented with European coaches to be co-coaches, assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And right now in the NHL, if you're sort of assessing coaches, I'm impressed and curious the number of coaches that are lawyers that are coaching. I'm not sure if Cooper is one of them, but
he is.
We've had Matt Holmberg on from Queen's University, who quit his law practice to coach the female hockey team there. And he did a session on the benefits and the parallels from practicing law and coaching a team. So any thoughts on that, Dave? In our era, it was like educated people. We can drop names like you name it, yourself and Ken Hitchcock, and that went on there to become great coaches. But today's generation, I think they need a degree of education, but I am curious about your thoughts about the importance of having legal experience for whatever that means. Being in a court case and being able to draw from that to transfer it to coaching.
That's interesting because there are a few guys. I guess I know Coop is a lawyer. That's interesting if that would be a benefit. I think really, to me, I'm not sure it's the profession you're in. I think it's the way you approach as an individual, whatever your profession is could be transferable to NHL coaching. I just think now in to be successful in coaching at almost any level, I'm not talking about the NHL, I'm talking about any level. Your interpersonal skills with people are really important. Your self-management skills are really important. And I think obviously lawyers, self-management skills, they have to get into court and sometimes contest some very difficult things and be poised and everything else. So that may be some transferable thing. But to me, any profession where you learn self-management, you develop your interpersonal skills, you start to understand more about yourself and how you best relate to people. That's very important. Like I always felt, I'm getting off the topic a little bit. I always felt like when I would coach the national team, at the end of every season, I would have a little report card on the coaching staff. I'd ask the guys for feedback because we always wanted to do a better job. And what did you like? What didn't you like? Things like that. And it was very, very interesting. And I did that because I wanted to kind of get better. And I think, to me, that's our job, is to try to get better at what we're doing. Because if we do that, we have more fun doing it. And the people we're working with have more fun doing it. And so it's as simple as that. Well, I'm not sure it's a profession. I think it's just how you approach it. There's a lot of very good teachers, obviously, that have been very successful in coaching because they do have a little advantage on somebody else because they understand growth and development. They understand, the psychological maturity within an individual. Those are benefits, but it still I know a lot of guys that were teachers are bad coaches. So it just comes down to the individual, I think. I don't think it's anything to do with the profession of people. Maybe, but I'm not sure. Sorry about that answer.
Well, I'm curious here. Jordan Fenton, I don't know if he's in his principal's office as a school or not, but Jordan, are you with us or out supervising in the playground? Go ahead, Jordan. Have you been able to listen in, Jordan?
Yeah, I've been listening in and solving some of the world's problems for those who are under the age of 12 along the way as well. So it's been, and in different languages, as we have French immersion and English here. But it's, it's really good to hear you, Dave, and the messages that you've been sharing. A lot of them are great reminders of the roles that we play as coaches and the importance of where we place our time. You think about the overload piece, and Tom talked about Instat and that. And I actually went a little bit the other way, Tom, in that our home jerseys have had bad coloring in that they were red with black numbers on them, and those computers in Russia where they send the Instat video to wouldn't read our jerseys for the algorithms. So we ended up changing the numbers on it so that we can share that information with kids. But I take it the other way with it and have the kids share with me what information they would like to go over. Put the onus back on them, but the kids that I'm working with are U18, so they're 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And some of them, I know that they look at everything that they see, and there's others that I know that they hardly ever log into it and those pieces. But so it's great hearing your experiences, Dave, and I know that Wally shares many Dave King-isms with us as mentor, and they're always great nuggets to take along with us. As far as numbers go, Dave, I came across the numbers on the IHF website a few years ago, and the Canada has been surpassed by the US by number of players registered.
Wow.
Last year was the first year that it happened. Canada has just over 513,000 players. The US has 551,000 players.
Wow. Interesting.
And then the breakdown of it is Canada has just over 2,800 rinks, and the US has just over 1,500 rinks. And so, in probably in both countries, and I know Hal would probably agree that we're still screaming for ice time, no matter how many rinks we have. But the problem is that they sit idle during the day. Although those of us in schools try and I've started a hockey program in each of the schools I've been at to try and make use of some of that time during the day to help out kids and that. And the other thing that's pretty interesting, though, where we're even in it is female players. The Americans have 88,000 female players,
Mhm.
and Canada has 89,000.
Wow.
And the breakdown on, they call it junior players. I don't know what the heck that means. Canada has 361,000 of them, and the Americans have just over 300 or right around 320. And then it says male players in the US is 143,000, and in Canada is only 62. So I don't know what that means.
Is that juniors? Is that it?
Well, the junior number is higher, Hal. I don't know, like the junior numbers are in the 300,000 range, and then the male says only 62. So I don't know what that breakdown is, but the big thing for me is that the female numbers are pretty big in both of those countries, and I think it's showing where the growth of our game. I know that that's where the growth is happening here in Calgary, that there are 1,400 female players within GHC and another 700 that are still playing on the male side. So you got 2,100 that way, whereas the quadrants and that the male side is receding in their numbers. That they're stagnant, if not shrinking, in numbers. And then when you talk about other sports, Dave, here in Chestermere where I work, I know that just a couple of years ago that there were 1,400 kids registered in Chestermere minor soccer and only 900 in minor hockey.
Wow.
And in a community of just under 30,000.
Yeah.
Is that a cost issue, do you think?
Part of it's cost. Part of it is also, though, that we have a lot of new Canadians, or relatively new Canadians, that hockey was never their sport. Soccer was.
Right. Yeah.
The demographic issue.
Yeah.
We
And
see
a
that
community
here.
that only has 20, or a community that has 29,000 or around that people with only 2 sheets of ice is also a limiting factor.
Yeah, we're going to build another sheet of ice here. And I think there's 4 or 5 projects just in Minnesota going on right now, and not including the super rink, which already has 8 sheets, and they're talking about building 2 more. But my team, we share, we have shared ice practices 95% of the time, which is too much. And we're a small program. We've only got 300 kids in the whole program, but a lot of kids at the lower levels. But we also see the high school programs contracting. We lose, the boys hockey is losing numbers for whatever reason, at least in Minnesota. So
I've always felt, guys, with the dropout rate, yes, there's the expense, there's the demographics, but I think one of the underlying reasons is that when I was first started coaching, it was kids could get to 15 and 16 before they really figured out if they were going to be good enough. Now it's that has dropped because we have the traveling teams, we have all these all-star teams or super leagues, whatever they have for children. And so at a younger age, they seem to recognize that, hey, maybe I should go to something else and do something else and play something else. And so I guess it has food for thought for us because we love our game so much, is to, how can we deal with that realization? Can we, is there ways to do it? I don't know if we have to have traveling teams for kids 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't know that. I'm not an expert on those kind of things, but we tend to start to cut things down, trim things up. Kids are disappointed that they can't play at age 10 or 11 with a traveling team, so they go somewhere else. I'm wondering if those things might be things that are changeable. Some aren't. Demographics, things like that, are that's the way it's going to be. Fine, but I don't know if we aren't developing specialization in our game, or because to me, I've seen kids at 11 and 12 that weren't really, they were just average players, but boy, at 15, 16, because they stayed with it, they became real good hockey players. And so I don't know. I just think that we have to look at what we're doing not just in coaching, Wally, but in the structure of our game. In terms of all those decisions about hockey academies and all that, we have to look at all those things because I think we're creating a model that I don't know where it's going. I mean, if it's going to be a model, it's going to be very expensive to play. You have to prove your worth by about age 11 or 12.
Yep.
I think for sure see our numbers shrink. No question about it. There'll be other sports that become better sports to play. And then
Well,
hockey
Dave,
has to be fun too.
yeah, Dave, you've hit it on the nail on the head of where it has to be looked at. Is you go back to the monetization of the game, and when you talk about it changing from hockey schools to hockey academies and those sorts of things, back in the day when a kid went to a week-long hockey camp in the summer to training all year round and all of those things, I call that the monetization of the game. I don't feel that people shouldn't be able to make a living however they want to do it, but it's become very problematic. It's the dropout piece versus the not starting piece are two different things.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of the traveling teams at 9 and 10 years old, well, we know that has more to do with mom and dad wanting to sew an extra A on their own jacket than their kids, and those sorts of things. So it is a real challenge, and I see it here at the school level. And when I talk about us starting hockey programs, it was always at cost recovery. I was always fortunate enough to be in a role where either I could run the program until I could find a teacher that could,
Right.
and then I just absorbed the cost of that instructor as part of my staff, and then it was just cost recovery on what the ice and transportation was. So we had a private company want to come out to Chestermere when I was at the high school and wanted to take over the program. And I said, okay. At that time, I had Bobby Joe Slusar, who had played 10 years on the women's national program, running my program. And I said, okay, what are you going to offer? And they said, well, they went into the individual skills stuff and that. And I said, okay, so who is the instructor you're going to send out? Well, it was this kid that had played junior and a little bit of minor pro and that. And then I said, okay, and what's the cost going to be? Well, the starting cost for the youngest age kids was going to be about $3,500. I said, okay. I said, well, here's the program we have in our school. I said, I've got Bobby Joe Duro, who played at Wisconsin and won a couple national championships there, played in the national team program for 10 years. I said, she's got her strength and training or development training, the same as the strength and conditioning coaches for all pro teams. And I said, the kids are getting 50 ice times for $350.
Wow.
And it was like,
That's interesting.
well, it's just one of those pieces. And I said, I'm not saying that our program is going to be that much better than yours, but I'm going to say that it's not going to be 10 times worse either. So for the cost and that piece. But you talk about the dropout piece. We had a psychologist by the name of Dr. Alex Russell from Toronto come out and speak to staff, and he was talking about anxiety and that. And we started talking about dropping out of things as students got older. And he goes, well, the biggest difference is gender. He said, your females, when they get into high school, he said they'll do what he called running on a treadmill. They'll get so focused on one thing that everything else drops to the wayside and they just go. So he said, if their goal is to get into a certain particular university program, said they'll drop everything off, even if they're a decent varsity athlete. If they're not a top varsity athlete, if they're a decent one, he said they'll just stop playing that sport because they want to focus on their academics. He goes, us guys on the other side, he said, we're not that smart. he said we'll continue to play the sport even though it's taking away from the other things that we probably should be focusing it on. And he goes, we'll play on the lowest tier of hockey just because we're there with our buddies and having some fun. And he said that was the big difference with it. He said the females will allow themselves to get focused and they will drop off on everything that's taking time away from it. And so those are a few observations that I've got along in my gray hair.
Thank you very much.
Dave, I've got to mention one of the things over the years, and you coached major junior hockey. I don't know that the scholarship program was in place for the Western Hockey League in your time, was it?
Let me tell you something, Wally.
Okay.
We started that program. Now it's changed greatly, but I was coaching major junior. We moved the Calgary Centennials down to Billings, Montana in the Western Hockey League. And we realized we had a challenge for players we were a long way from our closest game was 350 miles. That was Lethbridge. And so almost 400 miles actually to Lethbridge. So we realized getting kids down there, we'd have to find some ways to enhance it. We also knew that a lot of stats told us that less than 1% of our guys we were going to deal with were going to make it. So we started a program where every year a player played for us in Billings. We gave them $500 to their education. So for every year they played, they got, it wasn't a lot, but in those days it was pretty decent, $500. So a player at the end of his career, if he played 3 years and didn't go pro, we paid him $1,500 towards his education. So we started that program, and it's become really under the guidance of people like Ron Robison and people like that. It's become really quite good. And these guys now go to school with very good scholarships from the Western Hockey League. And I always felt that was such a tremendous thing. The owners didn't like it. I remember when we did it, the owners in the league were ticked. They weren't happy because they were looking at the bottom line, how much money they could make with major junior. And we were going to have another cost thrown in front of them because to compete with us, they had to do the same thing. So we started that back in 1977, 78, I think it was. Probably you guys weren't born. Some of you guys weren't born then. But anyway.
I don't think I was.
Oh, yeah.
We all were.
Started that wall, and I think now it's really tremendous. Like I look at the Canada West Hockey Conference, and to see so many major junior players, ex-major junior players now going to school and having the funding to do so, it's really encouraging. In my era, a lot of our players, and you know yourself, you coached in Western Hockey League, Wally, for a time as well. A lot of your players in those days that didn't make it, they went into the workforce. They didn't have an education to fall back on, and now they certainly do. So it's a real good thing.
That's a great story. I had breakfast with the coaches of the Billings team in Billings one time. Maybe, I don't know if you were there or not. And we talked hockey for about an hour and a half, and it was pretty cool. I'm told that by one of the owners of the BCHL team I scout for, the NCAA they're negotiating. The Western Hockey League is negotiating with the NCAA to give those kids eligibility at NCAA schools in the United States, maybe as early as next year, even though they're pros. But now that with NIL in the U.S., they're pros also. I mean, they're all getting paid money.
That's right.
So a lot of things are going to change.
That's very interesting, Hal. I think that's, I agree with you. When I watch NC2A football, and a recruit out of high school has got a $13 million deal from a football collective at the University of Miami, wherever it was, it does make me wonder why we have some archaic rules. And I think a lot of the kids, that would certainly be a terrific benefit to a lot of youngsters. And obviously, you'd get kids, I think, can try other options and still go to school later. And that's anything we can do to keep kids playing the game at that level, at that age, I think is really
Yeah,
good. So
I agree.
that's good to
100%.
know.
Dave, down the road, I wanted to get Alan Andrews on from PEI.
Sure.
And my primary purpose in getting him on, he's experienced working with young children that have become superstars.
Yes.
And he's always encouraged every young player to have a dream beyond the dream.
Hmm.
In other words, always strive to be the best you can be. And of course, in hockey, that would be the NHL. But in preparing his student players at the ages of 6 to whatever, his hockey schools, he really prepared them for the lives they were going to live, but use sports as the vehicle to develop the intangible qualities and the work ethic and the respect you need to become the best you can be. And I'm wanting to get him on as a guest at a later date. His health is up and down a little bit, but the primary purpose of that call is talking about the kids that became super athletes or super people in life, doctors, lawyers, whatever, but Crosby, McKinnon, and talk about their upbringing and the importance of the family and the values and the way they were raised, that just became a part of their DNA and their leadership when they took a job or when they played in the NHL and sustained their careers there and make a big difference. So I'm looking forward to that down the road. The scholarship program, when I was coaching that 1 year or 2/3 of a year season in Calgary, I had a manager, John Chapman, who was recruiting a player who was not going to play. He was going to go to SAIT. And he said, Cozy, we got to get this kid. We're going to guarantee him a scholarship. He's only got 1 year left, but we're guaranteeing him 4 years of university if he comes back as a 20-year-old. And the kid's name was Mark Tenorti.
Yep.
And I didn't know about Mark, but he did come back. And we had a contract owing him 4 years of education for that. And John said, hey, we don't have to worry about the scholarship. He's going to play. And I just took, I accepted his decision, and he brought him in. And of course, Mark, we were getting near the end of the season, and being in Calgary, John asked, he wasn't getting any feelers for anything out from feedback from NHL teams expressing an interest in him. So we arranged a meeting with Cliff Fletcher to try to sell. Geez, we've got this player, and John's a very good scout. He ended up becoming Philadelphia scout, and I remember going to the office with him trying to convince them to take Tenorti. And of course they didn't, but eventually Mark did play pro a number of years and played in world championships as well. He wasn't one of those that took advantage of the scholarship.
Right.
But that was the era of, keeping players interested in playing at the highest competitive level they could.
Right.
And last night's game, when Mount Royal University played the University of Calgary, all of the players had played in the Western Hockey League, and it was amazing. I'm watching them play and saying, 4 years of education, and they're young men already.
Yeah.
20 years old. They're going to come out of there so much the better for having done what they've done. It's a price to pay. They sacrificed a lot, but I know so many of them today that are doing great things, and they're parts of the alumni of the University of Calgary.
Yeah.
That have gone on and played pro hockey, that haven't, but boy, the things they're doing, the leadership they're providing, the kind of quality people they are, they're sort of the fabric of the communities that they live in. So I
Right.
just think the sport does great things for people, and that's what we're all about here at this little group. And
Yeah.
uh, I'm I'm always, Dave, referring to what I've learned from you, and I always bring your name up, and of course they don't understand the value of what we learned from having to play against the Soviets. They
Mhm.
made you better coaches,
Yeah,
especially without the puck.
for sure.
I've,
Absolutely.
I've got to share with you at the U, with all of our girls hockey teams, the Girls Hockey Calgary. I last week I did an ice session on your progression, D zone scrimmage, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3. And I'm trying to convince them because all the skills coaches are, all their coaching is offense, create offense, create offense.
Mm.
And yet you play without the puck so much, you have to get it back to keep it.
Mhm.
Getting it and defending, to me, precedes possessing.
Mhm.
And uh, I have a U13 coach, staff I did it with, really appreciated it, but it's a little bit more difficult sell as you move up the ladder because, and like you've experienced watching, um, you know, you're coaching in the NHL, you've seen the offensive focus.
Mhm.
And it must have been difficult for you to pay attention to the defensive details that we learn to appreciate more than anybody else.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I should tell you a little thing, a little, that's a tip or what it is, but um, when, when I first learned the importance of defending was on many occasions when we had the puck offensively and we uh, were dispossessed by a good checker or a bad decision, whatever it was. And those moments we were so vulnerable because we had committed to attack and suddenly everything changed and we were without the puck and we had to defend. So it made me realize way back in my career that um, if you can dispossess a team from the puck in some of those key moments where they're playing with some risk, that is where you really get your best offensive opportunities from. So I've always really stressed with our guys, well, whether you're talking defense to offense or offense to defense, then the number one thing is anticipation. If you can see it's happening a second or two before it actually happens, that allows you to start your transition to whether it's defense to offense or offense to defense. And that's what the game is. The game is momentary, reoccurring momentary transitions in roles from attacking to defending. So, I learned a long time ago that we got a lot of our great scoring chances because we were really good defensively. We wouldn't have the puck as much as maybe the Soviets and the Czechs and the Swedes, but we got them in situations where we really worked at defending our blue line, for example, because we knew that was a moment when teams get really vulnerable. Around your net, sometimes they attack with too much zest and get caught deep. So, I learned a long time ago that number one thing is good defense and defending at critical moments where the puck is up for grabs a little bit in terms of possession. That's what it's all about. And it all comes down to that word we always hear about in the game is anticipation. The best players are always still a couple of seconds ahead of everybody else in seeing what's going to happen. Not what's happening, what's going to happen. And, I've always, that's why I've always tried to get guys that are, I've really found it's more fun coaching smart guys than it is dumb guys. So, and that's one of our jobs. Our jobs is to, I've always, and you did it very well, Wally, when you coached. I'm sure Tom does it. I'm positive does it. understanding of the game. I'm going back to what I talked about before. You know, that's the number one thing I've learned in my coaching is if people understand what you're trying to do, they're going to execute it better. It doesn't mean they're all going to be great at it, but they're going to be better at it. So, and that's the fun in coaching. I always found that the most fun was I still watch games with a pad and paper and write things down. I still look for those things. So, yeah, it's a great game. And I should tell these guys a story about you, Wally, with the national team. Wally would come out with this, maybe every week. I think it was Tuesday mornings. Wally would come out, and we'd always give Wally at least 15 or 20 minutes to work on some individual skill with the whole team. But I remember you did a thing on skating, defensive skating. And you think it's me. It's actually yours, that defensive skating. And it was amazing when it was all said and done. I remember talking to a guy named Paul Cavallini, who was a great big defense and played about 10 years in the NHL. And Cav was big, a little bit overweight at those times. We tried to really push his fitness. He had slow feet. And you worked with him on checking, just skating specifics and checking situations. And I remember he came to me and he worked on those things. And he came to me and said, you know, I'm not faster, but I skate smarter. I know how to skate, and I know what I should be doing in terms of my positioning, my skates and this and my edges and all that stuff. And so I learned a long time ago, Wally, having people like yourself, very valuable. And that's what coaching staffs are. I mean, you are a staff. You've got a number of different people with different skill sets, different approaches to the game, different view of the game. And that's what makes the game so exciting for a coach, is to be able to draw upon those resources, you know.
Well, you know, Dave, were it not for that opportunity to work with those players, I wouldn't have appreciated it as much as I do now.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to encourage it with young players and the coaches of the young players, because I valued the result. And I remember when you were coaching the Flames, you had me do some skill work, similar work with their defense.
Yep.
And I remember I had about 20 minutes at one end, and I did the same thing I did with Paul. And after one of he was a coach, played in the NHL, came down. He was a defenseman. I just wish I could remember the name off the top of my head. He was blown away because nobody's taught those things.
Yeah.
And nobody's learned to teach those things because they never had to.
Right.
It was all trial and error.
Yeah.
So when we were faced with the adversity and the challenge of playing against players that were so much faster, agile, move the puck quicker, we had to learn how to skate.
Yeah.
And I often tell the story when you asked me to go over to the first Spengler Cup with George Kingston and Andy Murray.
Yeah.
The first ice time, George did a double regroup drill on the European Ocean ice, and they couldn't do it. The defenseman could not create gaps, complete passes, forwards had trouble timing, but the defenseman had so much trouble double regrouping, skating forwards and backwards. And I asked George, and thank goodness George was open-minded. I said, George, just give me 10 or 15 minutes with the D. And we worked on transition skating, deliberate, progressive, mundane, but important stuff. And we went back to the drill. They did the drill.
Yeah.
And the players that Paul Henry had selected, we had 10 college players, 5 from the US, Canadians, 5 from Canada, and then the others were European pros. Right. And I think you told me going over, you know, don't be too wishful about results. But that team won the gold medal of the Spengler Cup, which was, you know, really an overachievement and somewhat of a shock. But that aspect of being able to play the European game on big ice, and knowing how important those little details are, that's one small piece of contributing to it. So
Yeah.
we've learned a lot, and I just think all we want to do is make sure it gets passed on to coaches that are going to continue. So
Yeah.
uh, the benefactors, it's going to be the kids. So
I think, Wally, I guess the last thing, if you're getting ready to draw this thing to a conclusion, but I still, in my coaching career, the one outcome that I look back with some regret was I was at a young age, I think technically pretty good and tactically okay. But I don't think I had as much fun coaching as I should have had. I did at the University of Saskatchewan. When I got coaching after that for a few years there, I got way too focused, I think, and I didn't realize the importance of creating an enjoyment. We had a great work environment, and the guys realized they were getting better, and so they put up with me because of that. But I wish I'd been better with some of my players, better interpersonal with some of my players. That sometimes I was too focused on just them as players, not as people. And I think that's the biggest regret I have in my career. And after that, I started to change. When the best thing that ever happened to me was the chance to be an assistant coach. I'd never been an assistant coach, and I got in the NHL to be in that role. And I thought, God, this is great. I can talk to the players, have fun with them, and enjoy them, and work with them and one-on-one, and it was terrific. So, I really think that's important for coaches at any level to make sure you're having fun, because if you're having fun, you'll do a better job. You'll be more committed to it, and you'll help your kids get better. And whether they make it or not, that won't be you'll deal with that because you're seeing a bigger picture. And I really think that was the one thing that I learned. I wish 15 years earlier, when I coached at U of S, I had great time with my players, but then I got this reputation being so good technically and tactically that became my identity, and that was a mistake for me. I'm glad I snapped back into it and got a chance to realize the basics of coaching and working with kids at any sport is enjoyment for you and for them. And so let's always take that message. You always done that, Cozy, and I like that so much. I've always felt that you were a voice in the dark with Hockey Canada. I remember when I left, we had great conversations with you about, like working with people, proper methods to work with young players. And I felt you were sometimes talking to people in Hockey Canada and they weren't listening. They were so interested in other aspects of working with kids, technical, tactical. And I felt you were the first guy to kind of make a lot of us start to think, whoa, let's hang on here. So Wally, you've done a great job. You're quietly one of the best hockey people, I've ever met.
well, the same is true of my thinking of you, as you know, and I just want to thank everybody for coming on. Jordan, I'm glad you could sneak in, and Tom, of course. We've got a pretty significant group of people that we started pre-COVID, where we met for coffee in Calgary,
Right.
and then after COVID, it became a Skype call, and I edited it into chewable laps, chewable pieces. Um, and the problem is natural. We're old. And, the older you get, the wiser you are, but yet it's just not connecting. And I think just we keep doing what we're doing for the right reason. We know our why.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned changing as a coach, I don't know, as a head coach, I didn't head coach enough. I got fired because I was too friendly. And, the art of coaching, it's the right stuff, the right amount at the right time. And
Yeah.
I think head coaches, you've heard the good cop, bad cop scenario, coaching staffs and that kind of thing. And it's an art and you get better at it. And
Yeah,
the term sharks, no dead sharks, I think, as you know, you've got to keep learning and moving forward, swimming and breathing,
yeah,
which a shark has to do to stay alive. And that's what we want to do. And having you on, just
yeah,
another example to learn lessons from the past that they're so important now in the future. And I think the Hockey Canada closure or possibly opener that's happened with the problematic were created by World Junior players, we have to take it upon ourselves as being responsible as leaders in the sport.
right.
And although we're not governing bodies, we represent them and respect their roles, knowing
Yeah.
how complicated they are. And we just want to continue to serve the good of the game, which is preventing that from happening down the road and making a much more positive experience for young players growing up. And as you said, Dave, and you've mentioned before, enjoying your coaching more.
Yeah.
Getting more satisfaction from the fact you can be with young people. And that's one thing I loved about teaching, Jordan. I never aged when I was in the school. You were always around kids, and it might be in high school from grade 9 to 12 in small town Saskatchewan. But, when you were teaching in high school, 10 to 12, 3 years, a new cycle of kids came in, and you got to coach them like you did in high school sports for 3 years. Boy, the value of that, the satisfaction just from experiencing that, to me is pay enough. So thanks everybody for coming on.
Thank you,
We've
guys.
we've reached our 2 hours, and Dave, we're going to have you on again. And I'm going to edit this and promote it. And I want to promote your book from Russia, as well as the ice bags,
Loose pucks and ice bags, Walt.
loose pucks and ice bags.
I'll tell you
And
right.
I talked to so many people about both books.
Yeah.
And I just want to rekindle the interest in everybody in referring to those things, because the stuff we're talking about hasn't changed.
That's right.
The teaching of skills.
Enjoyed my morning with you. Thanks, and keep at it. Keep having fun, you old sharks. And Wally, anytime. Just let me know ahead of time, and if there's a topic or something, a theme to it, let me know, and I'll do a little prep.
Okay.
Glad to be on.
Well, we'll get the Sharks to come up with a topic, that's for sure.